All this history is very interesting, maybe even inspiring. Perhaps it's quaint. But you can't just let people walk around with weapons all the time. I mean, look at the United States. You know, almost the only country in the world that takes seriously the idea that people have the right to bear arms. And they've got the sky-high murder rate. Their own president says so, and he says it's because they've got all these guns, especially the handguns. So to address this argument, we have come right here to the belly of the beast. That's right, Vermont. And don't let these bucolic vistas fool you, or the fact that Barack Obama beat Mitt Romney here by 35.5 percentage points in the last election. Sure, this state hasn't sent a Republican to Congress since 2001, but they did elect a socialist to the Senate, Bernie Sanders, in 2007. However, the place is bristling with guns. It's estimated that more than 40% of the people in this state own firearms. 7 in 10 homes in Vermont have a gun in them. So you can imagine the lead must just be flying in this place, right? Well, in fact, Vermont does have nearly 10 murders a year, and 2 or 3 of them involve firearms. But that's it. You know, if you look at violence in the United States and you look at firearms violence, you quickly discover that it is not, by any stretch of the imagination, evenly distributed, nor is it correlated with gun ownership. As a matter of fact, if you look at the statistics, this famous evidence-based decision-making, you see that the rate of legal gun ownership and the rate of gun crime simply doesn't correlate, either within the United States or internationally. Washington, D.C. is far and away the highest murder rate in the United States, and yet they had a complete handgun ban until recently. And when the Supreme Court struck that down, the city still wouldn't issue permits to people under reasonable conditions. Same thing is true of Chicago. It was illegal to buy a handgun in Chicago for many years. And even though you can now do it, getting a permit is incredibly cumbersome, and very few people do it, especially among the poor. Whereas in Vermont, gun license? No such thing. Concealed carry? Anybody, U.S. citizen or an alien who's allowed to be in the United States, can do it. They don't need anybody's permission. The Vermont Constitution, going back to 1777, says that the people have the right to carry weapons for personal protection as well as defense of the state. So this is a constitutional carry state. Anybody here can pack heat. But they don't shoot one another. Guns aren't killing people in the United States. People are killing people. And guns save lives. It's a great tragedy, as a matter of fact, that in a number of dangerous parts of this country, it's very hard for law-abiding poor people to get hold of firearms. Criminals? Well, just the same way they get drugs, they get firearms on the black market. One thing is true about the United States. A much higher proportion of its murders are committed with firearms than in other countries. But the United States does not have an unusually high murder rate. Globally speaking, it's at about half the world average. And its statistics are more reliable than in a lot of places. There are all kinds of countries with much tighter firearm restrictions in the United States that have a much higher murder rate. Russia, for instance, the murder rate is 3 times as high. And there are plenty of places in the world where there are tight restrictions on guns, and yet the gun murder rate is a lot higher than the United States, particularly in Central and parts of South America. Because it's not law-abiding people who commit murders. Guns do not unleash the deadly passion that burns in all of our hearts, but we don't act on it for want of a suitable instrument. If people want to kill one another, they can do it with knives, with frying pans, with baseball bats, or with illegal guns. Because criminals don't obey the law when it comes to guns, just as they don't obey the law in other ways. To say that the United States has a high murder rate because of the prevalence of gun ownership is demonstrably false. Does anybody come to Vermont and quake with fear that they're going to be gunned down in domestic dispute? Bullets are going to come flying out the living room window? It's going to be a drive-by shooting, some random act? No. The bucolic appearance is real here because the people who own guns in Vermont are responsible gun owners, and responsible gun owners do not murder one another.